Okay, to start off, I just wanted to let you know that as a kid, you've probably played or never heard of one of these games before. This game is called Tap the Frog. For those who don't know, Tap the Frog is a video game that was owned by Playfo and Playmouse, two companies that created the game. Some sources say it aired on July 29, 1969, which is correct, but most sources say it actually aired on February 23, 2012, which is absolutely wrong. And how many people was it played by again? Can you guess? 1, 3, 5 fans? No! Tap the Frog was played by a whopping 10 million! And I, Eddie, am one of those many 10 million people who love Tap the Frog. And just to prove that all this stuff is true, here's a sample of my gameplay just for you. And here's another thing I wanted to tell you. Before we start, I just wanted to let you know that you've probably never heard of the sequel of Tap the Frog before. And here it is. And that sequel goes by the name of Tap the Frog Faster, or Tap the Frog 3. As you may know, just like Tap the Frog was created by Playfo and Playmouse, Tap the Frog Faster was created by these two same things. Most sources say it aired on January 5th, 1971, which is correct, but all of the other sources say it aired on January 28th, 2016, which is wrong. Unfortunately, both the sequel and the prequel were both removed from the App Store in 2023. And this was either an accident, or they just did it on purpose to make room for more games. And just to honor the memory of these two, here's a sample of my gameplay just for you. Okay, so, you might not know this, but for this last part, I have created a story for you to enjoy. It's a very sad story, but with a happy ending. Let's begin, shall we? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I present to you, for one day only, the 100% real origin story of Ted the Frog 2. Enjoy! Once upon a time, there was a frog who loved to build. His name was Bob Rackstraw. He started building block towers since he was 3 years old as a tadpole, but as he got older, his architect skills grew more and more advanced. So on July 17th, 1969, he built a launch pad for a rocket called the Saturn V to lift off to the moon. An astronaut named Neil Armstrong was inside the top of a rocket, waiting to take off. So he invited only one guest, his best friend, and he decided to build a bench for himself. Around 15 minutes before liftoff, he got out his biggest megaphone and made the biggest, loudest noise he could.
Attention, people of Earth! The launch starts in 15 minutes!
He cried.
What if the rocket explodes?
Asked a friend behind him, 10 minutes before liftoff.
Nonsense!
Bob chuckled.
Everything is fine.
And he threw him a penny to wish him good luck. About 5 minutes before liftoff, a passerby came along. He asked,
"Is there anything wrong with the spacecraft?"
No,
replied Bob.
the rocket is completely okay, but I appreciate you double-checking.
Good choice of answers.
Agreed the passerby. And he teleported to the rocket to inspect for any disasters. He looked closely at all 3 main engines, and he immediately noticed something odd. He teleported back to base and said,
"I think the engines are clogged."
Clogged?
cried Bob.
That's a joke!
Never mind.
Sighed the passerby, and he disappeared. And before the moment of liftoff, the countdown began as always.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3,
But then,
2,
this
1.
happened.
Liftoff.
The Saturn V exploded, sending lots of shards of steel flying everywhere. And unfortunately, the passerby was right. The engines were clogged. And Neil instantly died during the explosion as the rocket completely fell apart. Bob was about to run away when,
Hey!
called a voice. It was the passerby.
I think I found something.
And he did. It was a tiny speck flying in the air. He looked even closer, and that's when he found that the speck wasn't a speck. It was actually an American flag flying into the air, carrying a satellite with it. The satellite was called XG-101 Frogtopia.
Wow!
He gasped,
This is something new! I've just made history!
and the American flag kept on flying. And it went so high that nobody could see it anymore. Not even a little bit. Then, all of a sudden, at 50,000 feet above ground, the American flag and satellite stopped entirely, freezing in place in the air. But because of Earth's immense gravity, the entire freeze frame lasted for only 1 millisecond. And right after that 1 millisecond freeze frame, the American flag burst into flames, immediately going down the atmosphere. And that explosion pushed the satellite right up into the sky. And from all the way up there, the passerby could see the shimmer of that fire.
This is terrible.
He gulped. By 25,000 feet above ground, the fire had already melted the flag itself, but the pole was still intact,
It's even worse than I dreamed of!
cried Bob.
And there's nothing we can do about it!
And by 10,000 feet above ground, only half of the pole was completely gone, and it was all because of the fire. And just as it hit the launch pad, it emitted another explosion, bigger and brighter than before. It was so huge that it almost made the people go blind. At the aftermath of the event, Bob was really sad, and he decided to call it a day.
Take this.
He said, and he threw a penny to the passerby.
Thanks, Bob.
He said,
I am very happy to have my first penny in a while.
But it didn't work. Bob was still very depressed. So sad, in fact, that he decided to hold a funeral for his favorite rocket. It was a terrible moment for the fans, and it was finally the end of this epic Saturn V story. Or was it? After the funeral, the satellite continued to fly until it reached an approximate 362.5 kilometers above ground. When Bob saw this, he felt much better. He was very proud of his career.
Look, Mr. Passerby! Look!
He called.
What's wrong, Bob? Did I receive another?
The passerby stared in amusement.
What is this?
He wondered to himself. The satellite had just arrived in orbit. It made 7 full rounds in just 7 days. And on the 7th round, the satellite was flung out of orbit by a tiny chunk of space debris, about the size of an average pea. The satellite was going so fast that it was headed straight for the moon. Everyone thought it was going to be destroyed forever. But the satellite just stopped just in time to orbit the moon. Suddenly, the satellite picked up a signal from a frog who had just landed on the moon. And his name was Neil Armstrong. Neil stepped on the moon and planted an American flag beside his rocket. Then he planted a Tepper Frog flag to honor Neil Armstrong's memory. When the job was done, Neil flew back to planet Earth to see all his fans. They were very excited to see him, and they cheered for him. They took photos of him. They applauded.
Who are you? We would love to hear your name.
And with that, Neil Armstrong became an absolute icon. And after that, one of the creators of Tepper Frog took this idea and created the very first Tepper Frog level ever, Spacewalk the Frog. And then, after many days of hard work, Tab the Frog was born.